All right, well, thank you everybody for coming out today. Thank you First United for hosting this discussion and Texas Impact for facilitating the opportunity itself during such a very, very critical time. As many and most of you are probably deeply aware, we are in the midst of the worst humanitarian crisis since World War II. And our world, we are not in the same place as we were out during World War II, so we should be very bothered by that. Refugee resettlement is the last durable solution for refugees throughout the world. So this is not an immediate jump and go opportunity that refugees have. This is when nothing else works, when nobody else will accept you, when your home country won't take you back or you can't go back, when the second country you have fled to cannot allow you to stay for various reasons. Refugee resettlement into a third country, not just the US, but any country that will take you, becomes the last and only option. The US has traditionally set the bar high and set the example for other resettlement countries for the number of refugees that we take in for all kinds of different reasons as well. Other countries are a little bit more restrictive. The US has traditionally not been. We don't discriminate based on nationality or religion, on physical ability or intellectual ability. Regardless, it doesn't matter. Refugees are a blessing, and we need to constantly remind ourselves of this. They are not a burden. They bring huge benefits to us and to the United States. 85% achieve self-reliance within 6 months after arriving to this country, meaning they are tax-paying citizens or residents like you and I, and they eventually become American citizens once they're eligible to. So refugees and former refugees go on to become our neighbors, they're our friends, they are our colleagues and coworkers, our families, and our loved ones. And we need to be reminding ourselves of that and of all the refugees that we have ever interacted with or had relationships with, because those relationships are being very much questioned right now, I would say. As a state, Texas has been highly successful in welcoming and integrating refugees into our state for many years, and largely due to our own welcoming nature that we have as Texans ourselves, which we should be very proud of. The state of Texas' decision to no longer participate in the resettlement program that was announced last fall went into effect just this last week on February 1st. And this means now that 6 nonprofit organizations have been tasked and charged with ensuring that refugee resettlement in Texas continues to go smoothly. Programming continues to be offered at a high quality that allows refugees to access them, to integrate smoothly into their communities. And Refugee Services of Texas is one of those organizations. While we were disappointed to no longer be working with the state of Texas, we are very much committed, and as are all resettlement agencies in Texas, to continuing to provide those services to refugees, to continuing to welcome refugees that the U.S. has welcomed in, and to facilitating that integration. So while we're no longer going to be working with the state of Texas, resettlement of refugees in Texas continues, the programming remains the same, and the numbers of refugees coming in remain the same as far as the federal government is concerned. Decisions to enact policies and orders that heavily restrict access to the resettlement program in the U.S. are very much based in fear and not in facts. And we need to be loud when we say that to those who may think differently. Refugees are safe. They are safe people. They have already gone through incredible vetting overseas that lasts years, if not an entire generation for some. And those being children who have been born into a refugee camp and have grown up in that refugee camp and may have even had their own children in the same camp. It is not a short process as some people like to describe it. Refugees are the single most scrutinized individual who ever sets foot in this country. It's far easier to enter the US under any other kind of status from anywhere else in the world than as a refugee. President Trump's executive order that was signed on Friday, January 27th, is already having incredibly devastating humanitarian consequences that you all have probably heard about in the news. Families are not being reunited. The resettlement program in the US is largely a family reunification program in many ways. You come first, and then your brother and sister's families will come after, and they all go through the same vetting process. In the meantime, families are not able to reunite, but they are also at risk of to the degree from losing all their belongings to also their lives, because resettlement is not an option and they are in those kinds of situations. So the chaotic implementation that was implemented on the day of the executive order has really had extreme hardships for families that were mid-flight to arrive to the US, just as much as families that were destined to come to Austin and to several other cities in Texas and whose flights were immediately canceled. So this is not the stories you hear in the news are not happening in other parts of the country. They are happening in your community here in Austin and here in Texas. Interestingly enough, after a federal judge blocked Trump's executive order this past weekend, we are relieved that there will be a few refugees who were previously canceled who will now be rebooked in the next couple of weeks. But those numbers of refugees are few and small. It is not the entire program continuing. It is a temporary, it temporarily allows travel to continue as the judge's order is in the process of the appeals court. So we still will see, we're hopeful that the order will not be reinstated. The order itself has devastating consequences for refugees themselves, just as much as for the refugee resettlement program here in the US as we know it. That executive order brings the number of refugees to be resettled in the US from 110,000 this year all the way down to 50,000. More than half, right? It also limits the countries that can be resettled, and from now until maybe May 27th, it means no refugees. It doesn't matter what country you're from, what nationality, what religion or faith you practice, no refugees. So the impact is far greater than the 7 countries or than the way some people in the news have portrayed it. The executive order and any other attempts to halt resettlement of refugees in the US really does make our country less safe, not more. And in the meantime, it hurts people who are just going through the steps that they have been asked to go through in order to be able to be resettled into our country. So I want to thank you all who are here today and online and watching this later for your support and also the advocacy of refugees, of the refugee resettlement program. Now and in the weeks and months to come, it's not an issue that we are dealing with today or last week, but it's an ongoing issue, right? It's very much an issue that is at the forefront of the federal government's desires for the coming weeks and months. Advocacy is the single most important action item that you can do as a community member right now, the single most. We need you to be picking up that phone and calling your elected officials more now than ever. And their voicemail boxes are full for a reason, and that is because others like you have also been and already been calling. And please do not let that be a deterrent to you. Please continue to make calls and continue to try and get through. Most offices have, officials have a number of different phone numbers you can call. And obviously, coming in person is the best thing you can do, and saying, I am one of your constituents. I disagree with what you are promoting or what you are trying to make happen. I expect more from you as my constituent, right? We want to make sure that our elected officials know that we want to continue to see refugees coming to Austin, to Texas, and to the US in the same numbers that they have been, right? Without pause and without regard to nationality or religion or any other discriminating factor that may be in the minds of others. So as a refugee resettlement organization directly impacted by this executive order and other actions that other elected officials may be trying to take, I really ask you to make your voice heard, okay? It's not a time when we can say, oh, maybe later, or I'll get my friend to do it, because you have to assume that somebody else may be calling and maybe voicing something differently than you. So it's really critical to make your voice heard. Please also consider financially contributing to Refugee Services of Texas or any other resettlement agency, again, because the financial implications of this order are extreme and pretty magnificent, excuse me. So please consider doing that as well, aside from advocacy efforts, which again really are the most important action item that you can be taking away from today. And otherwise, thank you so much for your interest in this topic. I'm more than happy to answer any questions after we finish up here. So thanks again.